emotion produces a feeling, and that feeling and that nervous system, as we talked about, is activated. And when it gets activated, you start feeling symptoms in your body, because that's what anxiety does. The brain interprets a threatening situation and mobilizes a lot of structures to fight or flight. So if you're in a constant fight or flight state, you're going to feel sensations in your body. The biological imperative is to survive. That subconscious programming wants to protect us from danger through a lot of the different structures in our brain. So ancient times, dangers are very different than modern day stressors. So what are those modern day stressors? We all have experienced these modern stressors, which include, social media comparison, constant negative news, information overload. So a lot of times we want information. A lot of times we're just walking around looking for information. We have our cell phones and we're turning on certain sites just for more information. Anxieties from tech advancement, cyberbullying, social expectations, maintaining certain types of appearances. Big ones are economic uncertainty, complex global issues such as like climate changes, political election, even traffic congestion. So if you take all of these modern stressors, they're telling us that through our brain chemistry and structure, they start to cause a fear, and they cause a danger and a false sense of insecurity, which turns on parts of our brain that are responsible for keeping us safe and keeping us less threatened or less risky. So all of these stressors, they add up. They can show up as anxiety in our body. So let's talk about our anxiety reaction and how someone ends up seeing me as a neurologist. So we talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And when that sympathetic nervous system activates, it causes all of these structures to develop in our body. So what happens is, after agitations, we become sensitized. Then we release adrenaline, release cortisol, and then we start developing fear based on this feeling of these emotional stressors and the response. And when you have fear, adrenaline, fear, then it's a cycle of what? Tension, muscle contraction, a state of sensations in your body. As a neurologist, patients can be very tremulous. They have trouble sleeping at night. They have headaches. They have neck pain. They have jaw pain, back pain, weird pins and needle sensations through their body, excessive fatigue, brain fog. These are all symptoms of a sensitized brain in a hypersympathetic state of mind. And calming the brain and getting that other system involved is important. Although when you're in a sensitized state, to make changes in your brain become very difficult, because that system is so strong. Every time you get into a stressful situation or you're getting anxious, you go back to those programs that are downloaded. And if you think that you can change those patterns just by talking it out, it's not going to work. You can't overthink that. So what's going to happen is you need to do repetition, and you need to learn all of these tools to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, but with time. The way it's described is that when you're in a sensitized state, it's breaking your foot and putting the cast on. And if you think by taking the cast off on day 1 or day 2 is going to relieve everything, it's not going to happen. I was watching a program, a person that went into a remote area in Argentina, and he left with a monk. And he went to meditate. They showed his private life. He was very stressed. He was very anxious. He was developing a lot of symptoms. And he felt that it was necessary to do a retreat. So he goes on the retreat of the monk, and he goes through this meditation. And it's about a week or 2 weeks. He's grounding himself with nature. He's doing breath work. He's feeling great. On the drive home, he looks over to the monk and says, "I'm feeling so much better." And the monk looked at him and says, "You're a fool. Because if you think by going 2 weeks on a retreat is going to change your life and make you feel better in the long run, that's not the case." He says, you need to practice this in your life with repetition. And in order to change, you have to practice this on a daily, habitual routine. By going on a retreat for a week or 2, or getting a massage for an hour, or going on a diet, that's going to fix the problem short term and make you feel better on a short term basis, but you could go back to those programs. So that's why the subconscious is so strong, that these programs can only be accessed in certain situations. When it comes to anxiety and the reaction of that subconscious, but also your limbic system. Your limbic system is your emotional system that's very deep in your brain, has many connections. There's two ways of processing anxiety. One is through your cortex, your cerebral cortex, predominantly your prefrontal cortex. So pre means in the front of the brain. And then the amygdala. And that amygdala is that almond-shaped structure that is in constant alert. That amygdala is your safety and security, and it's processing information all the time. You can't talk to your amygdala and say, calm down, amygdala. I've been on a plane before, and the plane has never crashed. I'm going to be fine. No, the amygdala learns by pairing and association. What does that mean? So let's say you had a traumatic experience, and that experience gets downloaded. And the experience is not just an experience. It's an experience of all of your senses. The smell that occurred with that experience, the visual appearance of that, and it gets hardwired into the brain. So I'll give you an example of my situation. I was on a plane with family, and when the plane took off, there was smoke that went right through the cabin, and it was a very intense smoke. Actually, it's more of a chemical than a burning. And immediately, the flight attendant gets up and starts pacing back and forth and looking where there's a fire, and I was like, oh boy, that's it. Thinking of everything in my life and what I was thankful for. And pilot gets on the speaker and says, we need to turn back immediately. There's a possible fire detected, and brings down the plane, safe, get off the plane, obviously, because I'm here. So I recently went on a plane, and my senses on planes are okay, because the more I fly in planes, I'm more exposed, so I'm not as vigilant, and I'm calm on planes. So what does that mean? Like, let's say I go running. And I run frequently, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day. There's a path that I run, and there's items on the floor. And for some reason, it gets me almost every time, is that there's a structure of a leaf that looks like a snake or a branch. And I jump every time thinking, because I'm in my zone, that a snake is going to get me. I don't know if it's a fear of snakes. Over time, with exposure, I'm less fearful of that because I've trained myself not to be fearful of it. But what's happening is, that's exactly what the amygdala is supposed to do. Snake is going to bite you. Get out of the way. Now, I'm jogging on a path. Obviously, nothing's happening to me. But if I was to use my cortex, which is slower, hey, what's that? Oh, man, is that a snake? Is that a snake? If that's a snake, I'm done. So that amygdala process is so much faster. Now, the thing about it is that it processes under your level of consciousness so fast. So believe it or not, the pattern on the floor goes to your occipital cortex. From your occipital cortex, which is your area of vision, goes to your thalamus, which is your grand central station there. And from the thalamus, it gets put into the amygdala. From the amygdala, it sends that sympathetic response, which we talked about, adrenaline, and to the structures, and then to the cortex. And the cortex says, whoa, wait a minute. That's not a snake. That's just a branch. So, and when you start getting to that cortex, then the cortex lights up and responds to it. So by the time it gets to the cortex, you've already had a behavior that's going to protect you. When it gets to the cortex, it's, oh man, it's just a branch, so move on and continue to run. So that's to understand how your amygdala works and how it learns by association. So like in post-traumatic stress disorder, that amygdala fires up. We had a patient that was telling me that he develops severe anxiety in non-episodes of war. He would hear certain sounds, and the blender goes off. It reminds him of the helicopters in Vietnam. So the blender is a trigger of that sound, which is the senses, which triggers the amygdala, and the amygdala fires. So that's why, the amygdala learns by association and patterns, and by telling your brain, that's not a helicopter, that's a blender, it's not that easy. You got to go deep into the subconscious. And there's different traumas, therapies. Also through hypnosis, getting into those patterns, you can remove the consciousness, get into the subconscious, recognize those patterns, and remove that pattern, meaning light up the network by witnessing it or observing it or reviewing it, not reliving it. Because if you relive it, the person goes into major panic. So light up that network, then dissociate that network, then add something within that network that is going to help them through a suggestion, and then reinforce it through patterns and behaviors. That's how overall to start rewiring the brain into hypnosis, for instance, helps with reprogramming your brain with anxiety. So let's look at the sensations of our body. So when those sensations develop, then a patient can have chronic headaches or have anxiety symptoms and come see me. So when a person feels these symptoms, they pay attention to these symptoms and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling well. And what happens? More tension, more fear. So let's give you that example of turbulence on a plane. So you're on a plane on turbulence. Two choices. One would be let go and read a newspaper and enjoy your meal or your wine or whatever you want to do, or grab on. And some people grab on. You're getting more tense, more fear, more adrenaline. Or you can look at your guy next door snoring away with a newspaper and chilling with the legs crossed. Or you even have a look at the guy next to you who's been on flights all his life and the flight attendants that are just bouncing around that are calm. You're like, how can you be calm like this person? Your brain is saying, take a step back. I'm a witness observer of the feelings and sensations. So step one, do the opposite. A lot of people, because our brains are protecting us, want to fight it, right? Is fighting it. Fight it. No. Face it. Allow it. Feel it. Not overthink it. Feel it. Because when that adrenaline's being pumped and you fight it, it causes more adrenaline, more fear. You're running away from the problem. And then what happens is you avoid the situations. You know what? I'm not going to fly anymore. Or you start worrying more. Let me check the weather path. Let me see if let me look at the pilot. Let me look at the condition of the plane. All of these things that you're doing before you get on the plane. Because what's doing is your amygdala is preparing you for the flight. It's saying, danger, danger, danger. It's protecting you. Remember, the amygdala wants to protect you. And a lot of times, believe it or not, when you get on that flight, the feeling of danger, danger, and all of this is much worse than getting on the plane. Once you're in the plane, like, oh my God, everything is okay. Then your brain's telling you, everything is okay. I'm witnessing that I'm okay. And then when there is turbulence, what you want to do is you want to quiet the cortex and quiet the amygdala by feeling the sensation, changing your behavior, your action, allowing it, facing it. Because if you fight it, it's going to do the opposite. Because if you get in a panic attack and you feel like you're going to die, you end up in the emergency room, no matter what you say to your brain, is actually can make it worse and worse and worse. Face it, allow it. The more you get exposed to it, that's what they call exposure therapy. You know what? I'm safe. This is not risky behavior. So you have to understand, take it back and be a witness and observer, remove yourself. And once you start making that connection, then you start to desensitize. And you can desensitize with repetitive habits and changing behavior in order to feel better.